Well, it's everyone, Matt Mrozik, and this will be the next work in progress video series we're going to do. Again, this is just a different project, something a little different than what people see on my channel as far as kits go. This is a kit of Juggernaut. Now, I've been told this is a quarter scale. I've also been told it's third scale. He's pretty damn big, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's third scale. This was sculpted by Sheridan Doose. This is a traditional sculpt before he started doing digital sculpting. So this is a traditional sculpting clay that was then cut up, molds were made, and castings were made. So there's no STL, there's no 3D print available. I'm not the sculptor, I'm not the producer, all that stuff, don't ask. It's produced by Spawning Pool Studios, which they're not very active anymore. But again, Juggernaut, third scale maybe, sculpted by Sheridan Doose, traditional sculpt, and this is a old school garage kit from 15, 16 years ago or so. So it needs some love to get it going. This is very reminiscent of the Venom I did, the Spawning Pool Venom I did a couple of years ago, where that needed some love to get things to fit and everything. Great sculpt, cool kit. Again, just needs some work to get ready for paint. As you can see, I have them on the base. The base is fairly simple. It's just kind of some broken up concrete. And then he's got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 pieces all together. So we have the head is attached. Don't drop anything. This resin is not brittle. If it dropped, it would bounce, but it's just heavy. So we have the torso, which is from the head down to the thighs. The legs are separate. They come down to the base. And the way they have the hands cut up is kind of interesting. So I've got to decide how I'm going to tackle this, because the first thing is that this key that goes in this arm is missing. These feel solid. There's also a mold line I've got to deal with on all the parts, because again, this is just a traditional casted piece. The mold line is not that bad, actually. It's much better than the one that was on the Venom I did a few years ago. As you can see, we've got some pretty good gaps in the legs. The feet aren't sitting down in the base all the way. So I've got to kind of decide how I'm going to tackle this. I spent the morning getting some supplies for this because I needed more epoxy, like two-part epoxy sculpt so I can fill gaps. I bought some casting resin because I'll probably go ahead and fill the bottom of the base solid. And I'm contemplating actually gluing him to the base because it's so small and he's heavy as it is. It really would add a lot of weight to it. And this client is relatively local. He lives in Houston, and he's going to drive and pick him up, so this will not be shipped. So I don't have to worry about that. So I'm thinking about just making it one solid piece. I don't see a reason to have him come off the base. Even if I was going to ship it, I think just having him on the base is a good idea. So I think what I'm going to do first is I think we're going to tackle getting the arms on and getting this key fixed, because the way these work is that this goes in like these go together like this, and then they key in here. Now, I would love to be able to take these arms off for painting purposes, because you got to be able to paint behind them. And also the way the thumb is sculpted, it looks like it's supposed to make contact with the chest. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. So I think what I'm going to do first, which is actually pretty easy, I think we're going to epoxy the arms together here, get this one piece, and then I think I'm going to clamp everything together. I'm going to recreate this key over here on his right arm with a brass pin and some epoxy sculpt, and let that set up for a few hours to recreate that key. Because if I can, I'd really like to use some heavy, I don't know, it just may be too heavy for magnets. But maybe with a combination of a solid key and some magnets, I can get these to stay in. I can make them removable. I don't know. Again, I may just end up gluing them all together. All the ones I've seen, they've been glued together. And now that I'm thinking of it, since it is being picked up and not shipped, I don't know. I'm thinking out loud here. For painting purposes, ideally, the arms come off. We'll see. Because I really don't want to have to glue these on after paint. Can I paint with these on there? I might be able to. You know what? It may just be best to glue these on and work around. I don't know. Let's get these together first and go from there. Like I said, I think I'm gonna do that. That right arm's gonna need some sculpting work anyway to get that to fit correctly. So let's do this. I'm gonna set up for this and we'll get those put together. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get these arms pinned and epoxy together, and I'll probably just epoxy it and then hold it for 10 or 15 minutes while that epoxy kind of sets up. So to do that, I've got some, this is 3/16 inch brass rod. It's relatively thick. And I'll probably also, I'll sculpt this up a little bit. So the epoxy's got a little something better to stick to. So let me get a coarser. And I've got some 40 somewhere. $220. I had some really nice coarse sandpaper. I may be out of it. This will work. It's 220. There's some 220. So I'm not sure how long this. I think I'm going to have at least a day of building and getting things lined up, and then a day or day and a half of. I'm anticipating like 2 days of work getting it prepped. It's kind of my estimate. And then paint, I don't know, I don't think paint will take too long. Again, it's just big. It's a big piece, and it's just cumbersome to handle. So it's logistics. That's one of these big pieces. Basically, it's logistics that take forever. I did look on YouTube. Vince Ville Customs did one of these a while ago. I did not like his paint up. It was very monotone. Even the skin tone looked like the same color as his clothes. And then Rafael Robledo did one. And he had some good ideas as far as just building the kit. So 3/16 inch brass rod, drill one hole in this side, the correct size this time, and then I'll make a bigger hole in that side. And a drill bit somewhere. There it is. And this doesn't have to be crazy long. And this, I think these are hollow. I thought maybe it was solid, but that's hollow. And then again, that doesn't have to be crazy long. Just enough to kind of give it some support in the middle. Again, I like to scuff up my brass to give the glue something to stick to. Like so. And then I've got my big chompers. I think this will cut it. Let's see. Yeah, well, just take a little. Okay, there we go. Yeah, that would fall. I don't want to let go. That will fall in there if I let go of it. So we'll go ahead and get that in. Let's get that epoxied in. Oops. And then I'll drill a bigger hole on the other side to give me some wiggle room and play to get things lined up. And I've got some damage on the base that happened just went from when my client dropped it off. A few little corners broke off, so I'll have to fix those. It's no big deal. Let's see. Let's do this. Got this. Got my epoxy. don't need a lot for this. So and we'll get a nice coat of epoxy on the pin. And we'll throw it in here. Like so. Remove any excess, and I'll let that cure and we'll come back. Okay, while that pin's curing, I might as well work on this seam line, this mold line a little bit. So I'm just going to show you how I do mold lines. I just take a Sharpie and I mark it. This is my sanding guide. Yeah, this is a cool sculpt, and there's not a ton of detail like in the skin. There's like no skin textures, no pores or anything, so I don't have to worry about like sanding and having to repair any of that stuff. I can clean this up pretty, I think, relatively easily. And I don't, at least on this part, I don't see any mold slippage, meaning there's no step. That's when it becomes a really pain in the ass to clean up mold lines, when there's a step. This looks like it's a fairly clean casting. Okay, and it's just, I've got a fine sanding sponge. I'm gonna come here and sand. Until that black Sharpie goes away. And I do most of my sanding by hand. I don't like using a Dremel because it's too aggressive. And this is actually a soft resin, which is really actually nice to work with. And the Dremel would really just gouge it very easily. I'm going to go some 220 to start off with. Actually, it's a little coarser. And I'll just... clean up the sanding scratches with the finer grit sandpaper. So I won't show a ton of this. Again, it's just sanding. I like watching masking. And I'll probably go ahead and clean up the mold line on the other piece too. It'll be just easier to do, handling these pieces separately. This is working a little bit better. There you go. You just sand until the Sharpie's gone, and then you know the mold line's gone. So I'll just keep doing this, and we'll come back in a little bit. All right, well, it took a while, but I got the mold lines pretty much taken care of on these two parts. There may be a few little areas, but until I get a primer, I really won't know. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to epoxy these guys together. And I think I'm going to also have, this is a very messy part of kit building. I'm going to put this guy on the table, I think. And I'm going to dry fit this. There's really no good way to clamp these together. Yeah, this guy's going to take some work. That is for sure. But I want to put this on here and kind of do a dry run as far as where, okay, that goes there. Yeah, this side's going to need quite a bit of gap filling. The one I saw Raphael do online, he had a ton of gap filling on this side. But I think I can epoxy these together and just kind of hold it like this. I think what I'm going to do is, I don't want to put too much epoxy in here. I want to, because if I do it like this, I can actually hold this in place. And when I get the arms attached, man, this just did not line up very well. His thumb actually kind of goes against his chest a little bit here. Right there, that's actually where it needs to be. Right here is where it needs to be, I think. I don't want to put this key in. I don't want to make a key on this side yet until I get the arms together. Because then this joint right here is a little more important as far as getting that lined up, I think. So yeah, I think that's what I need to do. All right, so for now, what we're going to do is I'm going to just make sure I got enough epoxy in this part of the joint to hold together, and then I can fill in with more epoxy. And I'm getting low on Aves, so I found a local place here that sells molding and casting supplies, and they had a 2-part epoxy. It's a different brand. I'm gonna give it a shot. It's a little less expensive than Aves, and it's got a shorter working time, which I actually prefer, because Aves, I don't need to be able to work with it for 6 hours. I need to be able to work with it for 30 minutes, 40 minutes maybe. So I got a hole on this side slightly bigger than the brass rod, and I've got it bent and everything so it lines up as well as it can. And then once I get these 2 parts put together, I can go in and fill the gap with my epoxy putty. So I'm gonna do that. Put some on the brass rod. Then that'll be more than enough to pull this together. While I kind of settle this. And I am going to get some paper towels out. With some alcohol readily available if I need to. And get any that oozes out onto the chest. I was gonna kind of get that ready. And I'm basically gonna put this in here and hold it in place where I want it to be in the end, or pretty close to it at least. So I'm just gonna hold this here for 10 minutes or so until this epoxy kicks off, then we'll come back. Okay, so these hands have been glued together now and epoxied. So now what I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out the best way to get this arm keyed since the key is missing. So I drilled a hole in the center where the key was, and I don't know if it lines up with this hole, to be honest. So what I think I'm gonna do is, I think I'm just gonna drill a hole all the way through his arm here. Because that's a relatively easy fix. So I just kind of eyeballed center here. Let's see if I went through. Let's see if my drill bit's not long enough. It's a bummer. I was hoping I had a long enough drill bit to go through his arm and into this part, and then that way at least I know where the key should be, and I can build one up. I'm still deciding if I want to try to make the arms removable or not, for painting purposes. I've got to at least, and there's a little bit of a gap down here where the thumb touches the chest, so the more I look at this, I think I'm better off just getting them all together and then working around painting him as one piece. As difficult as that might be, that may be the better solution than trying to overthink it and make the arms removable. It'll be a little more masking and a little harder to get paint in certain areas, but I think I think in the long run, it's the smarter thing to do. I think my friend Randy Van Dyke, my friend Randy Van Dyke texted me this morning. He's like, hey, that's what I did. I put it all together. It's like he tried to make the arms removable, but it was too much hassle and they were too heavy. So he just ended up gluing it all together and painting it as one piece. So it's a little more difficult to do painting wise, but I think it's the smart thing to do. The challenge is just getting paint up in these areas and all that stuff. But I think I'll just be fighting this part too long to make it work, because the gaps are really bad. They're significant. I mean, I've got a quarter of an inch gap there, quarter of an inch gap here. And the problem is that if the key was here, that'd be one thing. I'd be able to put a pin in it and get it kind of all stationary and work on it. But I really don't have a way to hold it in place without a key there. So, man, this is. So I think I'm gonna throw this rod in here. I'm gonna see if I can. I need some support on this side of some sort, so I need something. Let's see what happens. I'm just brainstorming here. I'm gonna cut a piece of rod off. And see if I can find where that lines up relatively. So I think today's goal is to get the arms on and work on filling gaps and stuff. I think that's going to take most of the day to do that. I haven't worked on the mold line on the upper chest part, but again, I can do that once this is all together, because it's going to have quite a bit of sanding and stuff anyway with the epoxy I'm going to use. Okay, so that pin goes all the way down to the hole I drilled. And I'm going to try throwing some blue tack in this key. Just going to fill it up and see what happens. I want to see if this key line is even close to lining up. I don't know. So let's do that. So there's a lot of play in this arm right now, so that's where it kind of needs to go. I'm going to have to actually shape the ass. Like, man, welcome to old school garage kits. Nothing lines up. You got to sculpt and carve and get everything fitting. Okay, so let's see what I see that's like way over here. So the center of the key here is lining up in the corner over here. It's not even close. That's probably why it broke off. I'm not sure who owned this kit before, but this arm really needs to slide over a little bit. So I'm gonna drill a hole here. And that's pretty thin material there. I don't want that to fall into the kit because then it'll rattle. That would be bad. So I'm gonna just do just a tiny little bit of super glue on this. I'm not gonna put enough to make it permanent, just enough to hold that in place. So I'm gonna pop this out if I need to. A little zip kicker. Maybe. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so that's just kind of tacked in place. I just tacked that pin in place. This, oh man, it's just not lining up at all. Don't fall in there, that'd be bad. I feel like this needs to come over here. Okay, I'm gonna pull that out. Yeah, like this needs to squeeze in a little bit. Let's see. There's a clamp. I wish these clamps had longer jaws because I can't wrap it around, unfortunately. Even that's not the greatest. Okay, I'm going to take that off. All right, well, there's just going to be some sculpting to do afterwards. That's all there is to it. So I could drill some holes here and get some pins in this arm. I'm thinking that may be the best bet on this since there's no keys. This is pretty much where it needs to be. This part's, I'm going to have to carve this down a little bit and sculpt this, sculpt that in a little bit there. But I really need to fix this seam too at the same time. Well, actually I could get into there. I can get this on and then worry about fixing all that. I really want to get this on and setting up so I can work on gap filling all at the same time. So I'm going to mark where I want this lined up. I think the best is right about there. And there's like this little, I'm going to have to resculpt that a little bit. So I just put like 2 registration marks on that arm where I kind of want this to be. Right in there. That's pretty much centered on this piece of armor here. Let's see, now it changed. Oh man, this is a tough. Yeah, I really wish this had a key in it. Man, it's making it really, really hard. That doesn't line up. Okay. Okay, it does. I'm just looking at it at the wrong angle. Okay, so now I need to figure out a way to get this to stay in place so I can glue this on. I'm not going to worry about closing this gap up. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that with the epoxy sculpt. clay stuff. So let me get a pin going on this side here. Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of guesstimate center here and make this hole a little bit bigger. So I got some room to play. Oops, my batteries die. It did. I got another one. Some of these spots are pretty thin. And do the same thing, I'm just going to tack this into place. Where's my zip kicker? There. Let's see if that lines up. Probably not, but we'll make it work. We'll get it lined up. That actually works pretty good there. Yeah, but this is the play I need. Okay, so I gotta take that off. I'm gonna come back when I get this figured out because this is gonna be a while. Okay, so what I decided to do was go ahead and drill a hole just through the arm right here into the shoulder area. So now I've got a pin that lines up. And I've got something I can hold the arms in place and glue. And then what I'm going to do is once I get this all glued together, I'll worry about sculpting this area and filling the gaps. I'm going to have to make this armband a little thicker and carve this down a little bit. So lots of gap filling, lots of sculpting. So yeah, it's just a lot of work. So this pin lines up now. I got that working. I'm going to go ahead and epoxy this pin in just below the surface here, and I'll have to fill that hole, which is no big deal. That's like the least of my sculpting worries. And then this will go in all the way. So at least I got two nice long pins to hold it in place. So I'm going to work on getting that in pinned and epoxied. And then once it's all epoxied, then I'll come back and start working on filling gaps and sculpting. Okay, so I got these epoxied on, but there's not a whole lot of epoxy on this side because I just have it epoxied to this pin. I filled the key in here with epoxy, and that's really solidly attached. It just kicked off, so I can kind of work with this now. So now what we're going to do is I'm actually going to build up a little bit of a dam down here with some silly putty. I'm going to fill, and I've never done this before, but I've seen it done before. I'm going to build a dam. Here, I'll just throw this in my lap. With silly putty. Hopefully that's in frame. I think it is. Yeah. Down here. And I'm going to mix up some more epoxy. I'm going to pour it down in this gap. And hopefully it doesn't ooze out everywhere. And since this is a silly putty, it's basically plastic. It shouldn't stick to this at all. I've seen this done with resin on Raphael's YouTube channel. And I actually have some, I bought some casting resin today from a local supplies place that sells stuff for casting, but I just want to get more. And I'm going to let this go into the crack a little bit because I still want to be able to use my epoxy sculpt to sculpt and stuff, but I want more 5-minute epoxy in this joint just to make it really nice and solid. So I'm stuffing this in here pretty good. And then I'll go back with the putty and stuff and sculpt and fix and gap fill and all that fun stuff once I get these solidified the way I want. So hopefully this little trick that I'm doing here will work, and we'll just have a stronger joint. That's my goal. So what I don't want is after I do the gap filling to have me really flex in this joint, because if it gets bumped or something, there's a good chance that epoxy sculpt might crack a little bit, and I don't want that. So I just want to solidify this joint more. And I'm going to push this really good in there so it does go in the crack. And like I said, the 5-minute epoxy should not stick to this. I should be able to pull this out cleanly after it cures. So hopefully I got enough sleeve putty that's going into the crack a little bit. And I want to make sure I seal this up so I don't get any ooze out. I don't want it oozing everywhere. I've got some alcohol and paper towels here. I do get anything to run out, but it should kick off pretty quickly because I'm going to mix up a fair amount. And the more you mix up, the faster it kicks off. Again, it's building up a good amount here. And once I'll let it fully kick off before I pull the sleeve putty out, because then hopefully it won't stick to it and I won't have to throw away the sleeve putty. I don't think I will. It should not stick to this at all. So now what I can do is I can fill this joint up. I may do it 1 or 2. I could do it in casting resin, but I prefer to do it in the epoxy because that's just what I'm familiar with. Good. Okay, there's that. We got another mixing cup. And we're going to mix up a good amount of this. I should get some. I should stop using these paint mixing cups because these cost about 15 cents a pop. Okay. One, yeah. But these have measurements. I can get an accurate mix. This will probably more than I need, but I'm going to go through quite a bit of supplies on this guy, just building it. This is going to kick off pretty quick once I get it going. This is way more than I need, but we'll see if this does what I want it to do. I'm going to do this in my lap, but I need to get something. I need a towel so I don't get the epoxy off my pants. Set these out. This will go down that crack and fill it in some. This would actually be better for 30-minute epoxy, to be honest, but I don't have any. It's going to start kicking off pretty quick because I've got a lot mixed up. I should have done this in smaller rounds. Yeah, the cup's starting to warm up, so I know it's getting ready to go. I'll clean up a little bit. Alcohol and paper towel, wipe up some of this excess. Just still continuing to flow down in there, which is good. That's what I want. And then once this kicks off all the way, I'll take the silly putty off and I'll look at the bottom side. I'll see if it went down all the way. I really wanted to go all the way down into the joint. I see it turned yellow, so ooh, it's hot now. It kicked off. So yeah, I mixed up way more than I need, but again, I should if I was smart, which I'm not, I would have done it in smaller batches. But that's okay. You're learning, you know, it's all a learning process. But it's going to take a little while for it to kick off in the joint just because the volume's not as high. But it has flowed down in the crack a little bit. And I'm just going to let it sit here and set up. I'll come back. All right, it's been about 10 minutes and I took the silly putty off and it looks like we did pretty good. It looks like I got glue all the way down to about here. And I think that's going to be good. Looking over here, yeah, I went all the way down. So I think we're okay. Came down here. Yeah, I think we got good penetration. So I'm going to set up another 10 minutes or so. I'm going to clean up my workbench. I'm going to go ahead and clean up the mold lines around here. on all this, and then we'll start working on doing some gap filling and sculpting and stuff. So after I get all the mold lines, I also played with putting a pin here, so that's why there's a hole there. I still could technically put a pin there if I wanted. It does go down. I might do that just for extra. It doesn't hurt to have extra support in there, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to throw that pin in there, and then I'll work on cleaning up the mold line on the rest of it, and then we'll do some gap filling and sculpting. That's going to be quite a bit of work. All right, so once I get to the point that I'm ready to do the molding and stuff and gap filling, I'll come back. That's going to be a bit. Oh, okie dokie. So spent some time cleaning up the mold line on this piece. Actually, not too bad. It looks like I have a few spots that need some work, but I'm going to throw some primer on it after I get done with all the sculpting stuff and see how bad it is. Because this is one of those kind of kits that to prime it, check for surface imperfections. It's going to take a couple of rounds of primer. Now, this was a traditional sculpt in clay, so you do see some tool marks and stuff. And like the Venom I did, which was sculpted by Sheridan Doose, that's just kind of part of the sculpt. So like sometimes I would sand like all the skin stuff, but I'm just going to kind of leave it for the most part. So now we're going to go in here and start working on these gaps. I'm going to use up the rest of my Aves that I have here. Use that up. And then I'll try this new stuff I bought. It's the same type of thing, it's just a different brand. So Aves is, I'm gonna use some gloves. And I like to have some alcohol to use for smoothing and stuff. You can use their what they call Solvaset, but alcohol works too. The Solvaset is like, it's expensive, but look at a little bottle that's like kind of crazy. So Aves is 2-part sculpting epoxy. I'm just going to work in small amounts. So there's an A and a B, mix them up equally. Actually, it looks like I'm maybe a little short on the B, so we try to mix them up equally. So I can mix a little more A, and then I'll use up. Probably the best way to do it if you want to make sure it's exact is to weigh it, but now this is a little. Okay, so that's pretty close. So yeah, I was a little off in my mixer. That's what I had left over for A, so I'm just gonna throw that away. And I like to. I wish it's in smaller gloves. These are a little big. There. Yeah. I tend to like to wear I usually wear a large, but I actually like to wear a medium just as a tighter fit, and it's easy to work with, I think, when I'm doing this kind of thing. There we go. Okay, so Aves, you mix it up. I like to kind of roll it and fold it. Now this you have about, I'd say about a good 30 minutes when it's kind of soft. And then after about an hour, it starts to stiffen up. After about 2, you kind of, 2.5 hours, you can like carve it, but I don't ever do that. Now it says you're supposed to mix it and let it sit for 3 to 5 minutes, so I'll do that when I'll come back when I'm ready to start putting it on. Alrighty, so I got this mixed up, it's sat for a little bit, and now we're gonna start stuffing it in here and sculpting. So it's nothing too difficult. The other arm's gonna be harder because it doesn't line up very well. So I like to just, I'm gonna pack it in here. I'm gonna fill it in. Don't have to worry about being pretty right at first. And since this is a little drier, since it's older, it's going to be a little harder to work with. And then I like to take my thumb or whatever and put a little alcohol on it, and I'm really pushing pretty hard on this. So I want to go down in there and fill that gap. I think I've got enough putty here to fill at least this arm. And maybe the hands, I don't know. Since I'm still working with the kit in the raw form, I don't have to be too gentle with it. And again, this resin is actually a nice soft resin, so I'm not worried about it like breaking. Like if this was a Naren kit, I would not handle it like this. And then since this is need to be a sharp transition, I always end up having to do some sanding on this stuff anyway to get it to blend to a shallower cut. So right now I'm just kind of I want to fill the gap, and then I'll worry kind of about sculpting it a little bit better here in a second. See over here, there's not much gap. Actually fits pretty good right here. That's the only spot the arms fit is right here. You can see I filled the hole there. There's just my super glue and talc little trick. There's some bubbles in there, but I'll fix that later on. And this is the tricky part, is getting these areas that is just hard to reach since it's together. But like I said, I just think it's a better, smarter move in the end to get them together and then paint them as one piece. It's just my time spent better doing that. Actually pretty good right there. I'm going to clean up this excess on this little armband, so I'll leave it there. Paper towel good for that. I need something a little more. Just scrape it off. And before I started doing this, I wiped down these areas with some lacquer thinner too, just to clean it up and hopefully get rid of any mold release on the resin. So so the putty would stick. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking this sculpting tool and I'm laying it flat against the skin and just dragging it along and trying to even out that edge a little bit. So it's a smoother transition. Up in here is going to be a little tricky to get to. Not real concerned about this little spot right here. You'll never see unless you flip him on his head, but since we're here, we're going to do our best to make it look good. Okay, since this is kind of on the thicker side, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and go to the other arm. So I want to try the newer stuff that I think will be a little more pliable and a little bit easier to work with, because the stuff, even though it's been closed up, you know, you close the container and it gets air trapped in there, so it dries out over time. And like I said, I think one time I bought the bigger kit of A's and it mostly dried out because I don't use it quite enough to use it before it dries out. And I've got some silicone tools here too, which are good for smoothing. So the big gap is closed on that arm. This one, where is it? Right here. That's going to be tricky. So let's work on this bottom area first. Yeah, I wish this A's wasn't quite as dry. But it's good for packing in and doing stuff that's a little more pliable. It'd be easier to sculpt. I'm not sure if you guys can see what I'm doing. I'll just do a little bit of this on camera. It's the same thing over and over again. So I pack it in until it doesn't go in anymore, and then I try to smooth it out and blend it. So it's a little tricky spot right here. And again, we're just going to do our best to make it look as good as possible. Again, you won't see this spot unless you flip him on his head, but we want to do our best. Depending on what time of the day it is when I get this part, these arms kind of seamed and stuff. I might have to go back and do additional work after the dry, then get some primer on it, see what it looks like. Depending on what time, but it needs to dry, fully cure. So that's not till tomorrow. And actually, tomorrow's Good Friday. So today's Thursday, and I won't work on this again until probably Monday. Tomorrow's Good Friday. We got soccer tournaments plus Easter and driving tests for my daughter. So we got a busy weekend. And I usually like to work a little bit on the weekends, but sometimes it's just not feasible. So depending on what time of the day it is today, when I get this part done, I might try to get the legs lined up and stuff. We'll see. really good right here. So this is not produced by Spawning Pool. I was wrong. Spawning Pool is Sheridan Doose's company. This is produced by Joe Do Couto, who let's see, I've done his. He also produced the Venom I did. The Spawning Pool. They call it the Spawning Pool Venom because Spawning Pool is the company that he commissioned to sculpt, which is Sheridan Doose's company. If that makes sense. So this is produced by Joe Do Couto, and I've done his Deadpool kit a few times. It's a good sculpt. Again, it's a garage kit, so it needs work. But Joe puts out a nice kit, especially for the price. These aren't, like, I don't know what this kit goes for now. But again, like if this was a Chinese kit, this would be a $1,200-$1,300 kit. But again, they would have done all this. They would have done all this work that I'm doing now. So, but I think you get the idea. So this is yeah, it's just really, really dry. It's hard to work with because it's old. It won't take much here because this is where my epoxy, where I poured in that epoxy and it filled in the gap really well already. So this won't take a lot. And just because of the nature of this sculpt, it's a little more forgiving when you're doing this kind of gap filling, because you can get away with, you know, a tool mark here or there, but I like to try to get it as smooth as possible. I'm going to pack this in. Pony part. I'm just kind of going back and forth between the tools. These are the ones that can get where you need to go and do what you needed to do. Okay, now this spot is the most challenging, I think, because of what I gotta do. I might have to build up this armband a little bit for it to make sense, since it doesn't line up very well. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if I work on the legs today. I don't know. This is taking most of the day already to get this far. Seems like I should have gotten more done, but sometimes it just, you get going and it's like, okay, well, that took longer than I thought. Sometimes it takes less time than you thought. But just having worked on these kits a few times, I know what you got to do to get them looking good. I'd like to use up this aid as I could. So I can keep packing it in this joint until it doesn't go down anymore. Fill it in, just strengthen it and Yeah, see this spot right here. We'll see what I can do with it. My initial thought is to build this armband up a little bit and kind of re-sculpt. That little bit of the arm. But I may do that with the other stuff. I think it may be, because it's brand new, probably a little easier to work with. But I think you get the idea. It's filling, shaping, sculpting, just getting it the way you want. And then hopefully after you prime it, it doesn't need any more work. But usually I need a little more work. And it's usually where it blends. I need to do a little sanding. But I'm going to keep doing this. And then I got to fill this gap, and I got to fill around the wrists. And I'm also going to fill the gap that's between the thumb and the chest here, and then I'll come back when that's all done. Okay, so while the arms are drying and everything, I figured I'd do a little work on the feet while that's happening. So as I mentioned, this bases, I had a few pieces break off from shipping, so I just used some sculpting epoxy, and I just put a fingerprint in it, and I just replaced it. Let's see, let me bring this down. Right here and over here. And I just used some tin foil rolled up to kind of try to get the texture of this rock or whatever this is. Just kind of, as it dries a little harder, I can manipulate it a little bit easier and kind of get some texture in there. So I just filled the holes and kind of overlapped it onto the existing base, and just using this aluminum foil as a ball, kind of, and it seems to be doing pretty good as far as getting the texture in there. I think that'll paint up convincingly once it's secured. I still think I might fill the base with resin. I don't know. We'll see, because I've got a hole in that key over there, and it's pretty thin, and these areas that broke off, it's very thin. So I might go ahead and do that. But while that's sitting there, what I want to do is these keys, I'm going to go ahead and, excuse me, I want to reinforce these keys. So I've drilled a hole, and I'm going to cut some of the 3/16 inch brass rod, and I'm going to run it up here, up into the foot. So I do that to both of them. So I got this rod here. Vinceville Customs, he ran a rod all the way through the leg, all the way up to torso. I don't know how he did that. But if I secure this key, we're good. And I'll put a nice rod in the hip joint too. Maybe a little bit bigger, maybe like a quarter inch, or we'll see. But I just want to secure these keys a little bit better. So again, it's more epoxy. Lots of gluing and epoxy. And I sanded these keys down a little bit. They're hard kind of going in to the base. So I sand them down and I rounded off the bottom edge a little bit so they slide in easier. Like that. I can actually use this brass rod as my mixing stick. And this leg's got foam in it, because I could hear it as I insert this rod. So it's a hollow cast, but I'm assuming they've got some foam in here. And of course I scuffed the brass up a little bit with some low grit sandpaper. And we're going to coat this whole thing. And slide it in the hole. You can hear it hitting the foam. And we're going to push that in all the way. And clean up the excess. Sorry, I'm not. There we go. So now I've got a rod going from here to about there, maybe a little higher, which will just reinforce that key. And we'll do the other one. We'll put that aside to dry. Put that aside for now. Go. We'll take off the length of the rod here. Again, about that long. The clippers I have are just barely strong enough to cut this thick. If I go one more size in brass, I won't be able to cut it with these. I have to use a cutting wheel. Okay, there we go. I'll scuff it up. That cardboard, some more epoxy. And the legs I will, I'll pin. I'll add a rod. I may do, I think I do want to get a thicker rod than the 3/16. And I may do a steel threaded rod. I had some around here somewhere, but I don't know where it is. I may have used it. But the steel threaded rod is really good. It's super strong. And since it's threaded, you get a really good bond with your glue and stuff. Again, by the time you get all these joints pinned and glued, if it was ever to break, the resin would break before the joint would break. Like it would break up here or something. Get a good coating on here. I got way too much mixed up as usual, but I like to have more than I need. And okay, the foam, I can hear it. Here we go. Oh, that's good. So that rod is gluing to something inside the foot. It's just not hovering in space. That's the key. You want it to have something to grip to. If there was no foam in there, then I'd fill it with foam. But I can see the foam sticking out of the bottom of the foot here. Then I'll poke a hole in my hand. Where it is. Oh, it's sticking out just a hair. right, and there you go. So now those are reinforced. Alrighty, so it's the Monday after Easter. I didn't work this weekend, which is a rarity for me. So what I got to do next on this guy is I've got to get some rods put into the legs and into the hips. The arms have cured. This is that new 2-part epoxy I was talking about. This is called Polygem Easy Sculpt. It comes in these big cans. It works pretty good. The one thing I don't like about it over the Aves, well, the one thing I do like about it is the price. So this kit right here, which is, God, this is a lot. This is like a quart. So it makes a half a gallon of putty. So a quart of A, a quart of B is as inexpensive. This whole thing was $40. To get this in A's would have been probably twice as much, maybe, or more. But what I don't like about it is it's got kind of like a sandy texture to it, which is not the end of the world because I'm going to sand it a little bit anyway before I do the priming. But it's just got a little bit of a sandy texture, and it's just smooth with water, which I did as it was curing. So maybe I should let it cure a little bit longer and then smooth it with water. But I got the arms in. I filled these voids with Aves because I had enough to do that. Until I get primer in, I think I'll probably have to go back to do a little more filling, which I may just do with Bondo. The Aves is just to kind of really solidify the joint. I filled in the gap here between the thumb and the chest a little bit, so it looks like it's supposed to be joined in. I sculpted this armband out a little bit because this part of the arm was coming above this edge. So I just kind of created a little extra lip there. So the arms are in. That took quite a while. Put a metal rod here. Put a metal rod here. So these arms aren't coming off. I also used some of this new Easy Sculpt to fix some of the base that broke off over here. I just kind of put it in there, and I used some tin foil to kind of sculpt some rock texture. I think it looks okay. We'll find out when I prime it. This base also has like a little lip down here from the casting, so I'll take that off. I'll sand that smooth. Also, I was working on the pegs of the feet. I went ahead and epoxied in some metal rods. I think I showed that. So I have a metal rod going from here up to about the ankle. I just solidified that joint. I do need to work on these keys a little bit because it's a little, I want the feet to come in smoother. Like this one comes in and out pretty easily. I think I have a little epoxy here on the edges, so I need to take care of that so that these it's easier getting out of the base. Initially, I thought about gluing the base of the feet, but I'm not going to do that because he's heavy as it is, and if I did that, he'd just be really heavy. So I'm just going to sand this key a little bit. And I need to, so there is like a lip in the foot here sculpted in, and that's actually supposed to be there because it kind of wraps around the bottom of the base. So sometimes on sculpts like this, you just kind of like, okay, what should I keep? Before I put the rods in, I actually need to go over and do the mold lines on these legs before I do that. So I'm going to do that real quick. I don't know how quick, but there's a decent little gap here, and there's a little misalignment here and there. But it's actually really not bad here on the thigh. It's not too bad on the foot. On this one, it's really bad. It's kind of bad here on the back side. So I need to take care of that before I glue these legs in because I don't want to have to deal with that mold line while it's together. So I'm going to do that, and I'll come back and we'll add some metal rods to the thighs and to the hips. And for that, I do still have my brass rod, but I actually bought something bigger to use. I had some, but I don't know where it is. I lost it. So I bought some more. This is 5/16 inch threaded rod, and this is 2 feet. So I'll cut this in half. So I have a foot length, and I'll go ahead and really like 6 inches in here and 6 inches into the body, and that'll give us really nice support and solidify the legs to the waist. But I'm gonna take care of the mold line first, and then we'll come back and add the rod. All right, it took a little while, but I got the mold lines taking care of the legs. I also went ahead and drilled in holes in the legs, the key here, and in the hip joints. This is 5/16 inch threaded metal rod. So the legs and the body are filled with foam, which is good because it just gives the rod something else to stick to. And let's see. test fitted one leg and it fit really well. Let's test fit this leg. I'm gonna glue one at a time and let it set up. I'm gonna have to cut this rod short. Actually, it fits pretty good. Okay, so there's that one. Sorry, I'm on my lap. You can't see what I'm doing because this guy's a beast to handle. That fits in there. Let's see if I need to make any adjustments on these rods, because I'll put one in, I'll glue it, and I'll put on the base and let the epoxy set up. You can hear the foam kind of adjusting inside as the rods kind of move around to kind of get settled. So I'm going to have some pretty good gap filling to do on the hip joints, but I knew that. But the rods fit well. So what I'm going to do is it's going to be more epoxying. Nothing too exciting to see, but I'm going to go ahead. When I epoxy one leg, I'll have both rods in just so he's aligned. Actually, no, I'll just keep one in. So I got to take them off the base. I'm going to get one leg off. Let's do this one first. Take that off. Put this to the side. So you can see that goes into the leg about, it's going to go in about 6 inches, or actually about 4 to 6 inches. On this leg, because the angle actually bottoms out right about here, so it comes down to right about there. So we got that much going up into the hip. So I'm going to fill this joint with epoxy. I'm going to use my mixing cup again, which I need to get some better mixing cups. And I'll get a mixing stick. Actually, might run out of epoxy. I'm going to have to go get more epoxy. So things like pieces like this, just the size of them takes a lot of material just to build it. I was just at the hardware store this morning getting packing supplies for something else. I should have gotten some more epoxy when I was there, but I didn't even think about it. Mix this up. They actually need to work pretty quick. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to put my rod in epoxy and put that down the leg. As far as it'll go, about there. And then I'm going to coat the exposed rod in epoxy. And fill this joint because I really do want some ooze out. Say 30-minute epoxy would be better for this type of application. I need some more working time. this together. It lined up earlier. Now it's not lining up, which is not good. There we go. Okay, just had the rod too far into the leg. So it wasn't going to line up. Okay, so I'm going to let that. Put this on the base. And we're going to let that set up. Make sure his feet are in the right position. And we're gonna let this sit for a good 10-15 minutes. We got a lot of epoxy mixed up, so it should kick off pretty quick. And I got some ooze out in the joint that oozed out, which I wanted. I don't really want to run down his leg, but I just wanted to fill that joint. And I coated the threaded rod that went up into his waist with epoxy. Again, there's foam in here, so hopefully that epoxy will bind to the foam a little bit. The foam really doesn't give you any structural stability. It just kind of helps support the casting is why they do it. I'm going to kind of hold this because, again, this leg's got a pretty good gap on the back side. This leg seems to fit better than when I just epoxied. This one's got a pretty decent gap. It's okay. This type of kit. You just kind of get it together, really solidify it, and then work on filling the gaps and sculpting and stuff. So I'm going to hold this for a few minutes, let this cure up, and I'll come back. All right, so I went ahead and epoxied and pinned this leg. It's still drying, but you can see I got a pretty good gap there, but this is how he lines up. So once this cures in 30 minutes or so, I want this to get really, really cured as well as it can. Then I'll go in and I'll start packing in the epoxy, two-part epoxy, and sculpting this gap. And then as far as what else I can do today, I can work on cleaning up the edge of the base a little bit. Got some epoxy stuff put back on here. This should kick off pretty quick, so I got a lot of epoxy in there. I did get a little bit of ooze out, which is always a good thing on something like this. Just lets me know I got enough glue in there and it's filling in all the voids. So a little drip out down here underneath. Actually need to put I got some on the base I got to get off, but just use some alcohol and a paper towel just to kind of wipe it up as it comes out. And then once it kicks off, it'll stop oozing. But that looks good. So these legs are attached very well. They're not going to come off. And then once I get this all filled with the epoxy putty, it'll be really solid. So yeah, we're going to let this epoxy dry for a while. And then I'll show you using the this Easy Sculpt stuff, which is kind of like an A's, but a little bit different. It works the same way. It's a two-part. You mix it together. It's the consistency is a little sandy, and it's pretty soft to begin with, but it does cure a little quicker than the A's. The A's really needs a 24-hour for a full cure. This stuff cures in 8 hours for a full cure, so it's a little quicker in that aspect. So it does have a little sandy texture. I did go ahead and sand this joint a little bit while I was waiting for epoxy to dry. And it does sand pretty smooth, so that's a good sign. So I think this will take primer nicely. It'd be great if I could get, well, I can't, until this Easy Sculpt dries 100%, I can't prime it. But I can, while that's drying, I can work on cleaning up this edge in the base. I'm going to take it outside and just put a power sander and just clean up that edge. And then, yeah, then just a matter of priming it. I don't know if I'll get primer on it today. We'll see. I don't think so. I can get it primed tonight. I can get it primed tonight. Later tonight, I can prime it. And that way I can look at it tomorrow and see if there's any other imperfections I want to clean up. Now this sculpt, being a traditional sculpt, it's not like the cleanest sculpt. So it's kind of got, but that's kind of the charm of this piece, is just the way it's sculpted. It's not like super refined, which isn't a bad thing. It's just the style of it. It's very reminiscent of the Venom I did last year, which is sculpted by Sheridan Doose. And that was back when he was doing these types of sculpting things in clay and stuff. So, but it looks good. Let this dry. Like I said, I'll come back and we'll show you using the Easy Sculpt. Another thing I want to point out is that there's a pretty good gap at the bottom of his foot here. I don't have it on the other side, so I'm not worried about it. I did try to get his foot to sit more flat here, but just the way the hip's lined, it doesn't. So another thing I'm going to do with that Easy Sculpt is I'm going to wrap his foot in saran wrap, and then I'm going to kind of fill in there a little bit and let that cure. And then I can pull them off the base later tonight and just make sure I got that gap filled. I don't care what it looks like underneath his foot. I just want that when he's on the base, there isn't this huge gap. It looks a little weird. So I'm gonna go in there and kind of sculpt this rock underneath his foot a little bit more once I get to that spot, or once I get to the point of using the Easy Sculpt. Okay, so it's been about 15 minutes. And we're gonna work on filling these gaps in. And we got this Easy Sculpt. I got the lids marked A and B. And this has an interesting scent to it also. So I want to make sure I don't put the B lid on the A can and vice versa, because that will contaminate the putties. And then they could set off in the can, and that's never a good thing. And I'm going to use this hand to take stuff out of the B can. Like so. And this is actually really sticky compared to the A's. And we use this glove to take this stuff out of the A can. This is the B can. This is the A can over here. And I'm going to kind of visualize, see if I need a little bit more of this can. You can do it by weight. It's really, it says it by volume, so you just kind of have to, so those look pretty even. So the one thing I don't like about this stuff is that they're not, the color is very similar, so it's hard to tell if it's mixed thoroughly. It says mix until there's no swirl marks. Well, there's no swirl marks already because there's just the same color. So again, I like to kind of fold it in like this, roll it out, fold it, roll. Now I get my sculpting tools, got my little metal one here. I'm going to get a cup with some water in it. Let me go back to the amount of water right now. So we got a little bit of water here. And now A says to mix this up and let it sit for 5 minutes. This doesn't say, actually, there's no instructions in here, actually. It's just, I had to go online to find the instructions. There's nothing on the can. It did come in a box, but I didn't see any, yeah, it says mix until streaking is eliminated. Dispense promptly after mixing. Which means use quickly after mixing, but you've got plenty of work time with this stuff. And it's sticky. It gets... All right. It's pretty good. So just like doing A's, we're going to come up here and I'm going to start just packing this in all the way into the joint. I'm going to fill it in. Go. This is probably enough for this joint because I got a pretty big gap to fill. I don't care about it being messy or clean right now. I just want to get this gap filled. And then we'll worry about making it pretty. Keep dipping my thumb in the water so it doesn't stick to the glove, because again, this stuff is really sticky. I'll just do this one on camera and then work on the one off camera, because it's the same process. It's just filling it in and smoothing it out. Really forcing it up into that joint. Really on the back side where I've got the biggest gap, I want to really fill that in. Give that joint stability. Okay, so I'm going to push on it and it starts coming out. Other areas I know I've got it filled. Okay. We're going to clean this up a little bit. Take some of the excess off. And it's just really just working it, smoothing it out until we got the look we want. So I'm going to continue to do this to both of these, and I'll come back when I'm done. Okay, so I'm just refining this edge on this hip here. I got the gap filled really well. And I'm just taking this flat metal tool and I'm kind of just making sure that these pants are well defined, because I kind of just shoved in the putty and lost the definition between the legs and the pants. So I'm just coming in here and just real lightly redefining the pants, because I've got half an inch gap here, quarter, you know, almost a half of an inch gap here. So I just filled it in really well. And now I'm coming here and just trying to redefine that delineation between the shorts and I guess in the pants. I think it's two separate things. I'll have to go look. I'm just using my thumb again to kind of smooth and blend. Trying to taper this blend right here. And then once this dries, I will give it a light sanding just to kind of smooth out any just marks from me working the putty. That's looking pretty good. And then just following these wrinkles here. Just kind of redefining those a little bit. That and smooth it out. And then I'm going to come back in here and rescribe this seam line. So it's going to go straight up. Just like that. And that leg looks pretty good, I think. So it's kind of a slow process. You can take your time. I started to put a little bit over here from the excess I was taking off of that leg. But I think this looks good. Again, until I really, until it dries and give it a light sand and get primer on it, I won't know how good it looks. Because the primer will tell me everything, but from an initial view, that the seam looks really good. So I'll do the other leg. And then I'll work on the base. All right, so I found another spot on the base I broke off, so I sculpted another rock there. And what I'm doing now is I put some saran wrap on this foot and I'm just shoving in the other putty I had mixed up from the hip joint, and it's starting to set up a little bit. It's getting a little stiffer. Again, I just want to kind of get this in, and then what I'll take them off the base. And I'll show you how you just use the tin foil to kind of get some rock texture in here. Again, I just want to close this gap up a little bit. A lot of times I'll use Bondo to do this, but I figure I'll use this putty since I have it mixed up. Just kind of shoving it under his foot. There's a little gap, but there's a big gap there. There's a little gap on the other side, but again, this is just the kind of nature of this type of kit. Once I take them off, I'll put in the rock texture on this putty that I'm putting in now. I'll just blend it in a little bit. And then hopefully it'll look better once he's on the base. Again, I don't care what it looks like underneath his foot, so when I take this off, it's not going to be pretty. But that doesn't matter. What it matters is what it looks like when he's on the base. I don't want this to build up around his foot, really. I just wanted to fill in a little bit. But he has to be on the base so I know. I'm going to just go ahead and take this and kind of blend it this way a little bit. Kind of blend it into the base that's already here. And my saran wrap broke here, so hopefully it didn't stick to his foot. We'll see when I take him off. I don't want to pull any of the putty up. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Bring this around a little bit here, got a little too much. I can fill it under this toe just a little bit. Take some of this excess off here. Let's not waste any of that. And we'll slide it underneath over here. I'll let this dry overnight, and then tomorrow, I mean, this is about half a day right here, a little over half a day to do all this stuff. So I won't get a full day in today, but that's okay. I got some more stuff I can do. All right, so let's take them off now. Big boy. Yeah, I'll have to do some sanding on these joints tomorrow, just to smooth them out a little bit. But this dude is one solid piece now. He is not coming apart. His legs are really solid. Put it to the side. And hopefully I can pull this off. Yeah. I never use this stuff with saran wrap. It's pretty damn sticky. It didn't stick into the saran wrap. Okay, there we go. So now what I'll do is I'll just take some water and just kind of blend this a little bit. And then I got some tin foil here, just a little piece of tin foil. I'm just going to use that to put some texture in the putty so it just doesn't look like putty. Blend it into the rock that's there, and you can see how much of a gap is underneath that foot. Again, I'm not going to worry about this. The way this looks is fine. And then go in here and blend a little bit with this. Actually, maybe a bigger. Maybe more. That'll be fine. Okay. So I think that's pretty good. Get some of this excess out of here. And get rid of these marks that look like sculpting tool marks. I don't want that. You want the randomness of this kind of tin foil. This kind of helps blend it in a little bit. Okie dokie. Alrighty. Like I said, I'm not gonna worry about that the way that looks. Who cares once he's on there? And I'll actually call my client. I'll actually ask my client if he wants me to glue them all to one piece. I still might do that. We'll see. But there you go. So that's all blended. I don't see any other thing else on the base. The only thing else I'm going to do today is I'll take a just a power sander. I'm going to smooth this edge down because it's a one-piece mold, so it's poured upside down, and the excess just kind of comes over the edge of the mold. So that's that for that. And then after everything dries, I'll be able to sand him down a little bit, and we'll throw some primer on. Alrighty, so after doing all the putty work and everything on the legs and arms, I'm getting some primer on this guy, and he just barely fits in my booth without the base. So I've got a coat of primer on this front side. I'm going to let this dry for 30, 40 minutes or so. I'm going to flip him around and do the other side. And then probably have to flip him on his head and make sure I get everything underneath. But this is looking good. From what I can tell, my putty work is very good so far. As this dries, it'll let me know if I got some pretty heavy sanding scratches here. I'll probably have to take that out a little bit. So I may have a little sanding here and there on my putty, but from what I can tell, it looks pretty good. I can't see the joints over here yet, but the wrist looks good here where I puttied the wrist together. So that looks pretty good. But I did use some pretty heavy sanding over here to kind of smooth out some of this putty yesterday. So I'll probably just sand those out a little bit because I can see them, but it's looking good so far. So when I come back, this guy will be all in primer, and we'll look at any other surface imperfections. Again, with this sculpt, I'm not going to go and give the whole thing a sanding because I don't want to lose the kind of like the feel of the sculpt. So like, you know, you can kind of just see some of Sheridan's sculpting marks and stuff, and it kind of loses its character if I go in and try to take all this out. So we're going to leave it just because it kind of, that's the kind of sculpt it is. There's like a little spot right here I may sand out on the buckle. That looks like that shouldn't be there. So again, I'll just be looking for imperfections and taking them out. Okay, so this is Juggernaut, ready for paint. So I spent today priming him, sanding out a few really obvious areas. I got a few little thin areas of primer. I may hit it again before I put some paint on tomorrow, but this guy's ready for paint. So again, this is a Sheridan Doose clay sculpt. So it's not a really smooth sculpt, which kind of gives it its character. So like, I'm not going in, I'm not going to take out all these tool marks and stuff. I'm going to leave those in there. But there were a few areas where there were obvious like resin sludge, probably from the castings. I can tell that the base was an older casting because I picked out a bunch of silicone between the rocks, which meant the molds were going. So if that's the case, then this may be a later casting. The newer castings will usually typically be cleaner because the rubber is still new. But yeah, it looks good. Again, it's all one piece except for him. He does come off the base still. You can see where I did my putty work there. It blends in nicely. In the areas where I had to fix the rocks with putty, I can't even tell where I did, to be honest. It's like 2 or 3 spots where the base had broken, and I fixed those. They blended in well. All my Aves work and putty work was really, really good. I had one spot where I had to sand out some really heavy sanding scratches, but I went in and sculpted some pant outlines here because by the time I got the legs on and joined, they didn't line up very well. So I kind of re-sculpted where the pants met the legs. So those look really good. It's a little soft here, but that's okay. When I do it with paint, they'll be fine. But yeah, the putty work looks good. All blends in nicely. And it looks like it was done in one piece. So that's it. That's it for this video. Work in progress done. And then tomorrow, I'll start on the skin tones. Once those are done, I'll get that all masked off and start working on his clothes, which will be really challenging since he's all glued together. But considering that I had a lot of issues with the arms lining up, and it was just I think a better, smarter move to get them all together and get this all taken care of before I started trying painting. So I think it would have been really hard to get it lined up and looking good after paint. So you know, it's gonna be more challenging to paint them, but I think it was the smart move. But there you go, just a tall. In case you didn't know how tall this guy is, I think he's like 30 inches tall. Let's see. Sorry, I'm doing this handheld, obviously. So from the base to the top of his head, right at 27.5 inches tall. Sorry, right at 20. It's actually like right at 28 inches tall. That's how tall he is. Big boy. All right, so stay tuned for the painting videos. Thanks.